Welcome back, friend. Tonight we travel to Rome, 312 CE, on the eve of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, where the Tiber runs dark and tense under the watch of two armies. A vision is said to guide an emperor, and a small tablet with the words, "By this, conquer," may decide how the world remembers that night. If the truth is buried or twisted, a hard-won peace may falter, and a faith's first dawn over Rome could dim. I am Snorelock Holmes, the dreaming detective, steady in storms and soft in voice, following each clue backward until history itself confesses. Before we drift, tell me in the comments which city you're listening from tonight. Now, breathe and settle, and if these sleepy mysteries soothe you, subscribe so you're ready for our next gentle journey. Chapter 1. Rain, Coins, and a Knock. The rain came light and patient, tapping the window in a rhythm that Penelope and I both knew well. My old beagle had made a nest of herself at the foot of my chair, brown and white fur rising and falling with deep, even breaths. I sat in my lamplit study with a tray of late Roman coins spread like a dull constellation on green felt. A magnifier lay across my palm. I tilted a bronze to meet the warm glow. Sol Invictus looked back at me from one disk, the unconquered sun with his radiate crown. The rays were plain but fur. I set him to the left. On another, the emperor held a standard, and at the field edge, a tiny scratch curved into a half-formed key and a shy row. It might have been a casual mark from a tool. It might have been more. I wrote a neat label on a small card, Mint of Trier, and slid it under the first coin. A soft knock came at my door. Not a timid touch, not a demand, but a careful knock that asked to be answered without disturbing the rain. I rose. Penelope's ears flicked, then settled again. I opened the door to a bicycle courier with a dripping cap and a canvas bag against his ribs. Rain freckles darkened his jacket. "Mr. Holmes?" he asked. I nodded. He passed me a padded envelope that had absorbed the weather. The paper was stamped with a Roman return address in a faded blue. He added, almost to himself, "She said it could not wait." "She?" I asked. The courier looked down the stairwell, then back at me. "Dr. Ilani Zupan," he said. His voice was low, like the rain. "From Rome." I thanked him and pressed a folded note into his hand for his trouble. He gave a small, grateful smile and left as he came. The door shut, a quiet seal against the damp night. I turned the envelope over in my hands. The glue had relaxed under the rain. I opened it with a brass letter knife that had the small, stubborn weight of real work. The smell that slipped out was old stone and damp vellum. Inside were 3 items wrapped in waxed paper. The first was a rubbing on wet-stained vellum. I unrolled it on my desk blotter and pinned the corners with paperweights. The image was a small circle with letters marching around a blazing disc, compressed and sure. HOC. Then a faint space, then SIGNO. The lines were shallow but confident, as if traced from an embossed surface. It did not look like a coin. The spacing was tight and even, more like a plaque than currency. The second item lay cool and stubborn in my palm, a corroded iron rivet. Ancient lime choked its grooves. When I tilted it under the lamp, I saw 3 tiny grains sunk in the lime at one end. They formed a small, perfect triangle. Not random grit, I thought. These were pressed in with care before the lime set. The third item was a note on thick cream paper. folded once. I opened it. The handwriting tilted forward with purpose. Snorelock, it read. I am in Rome on a temporary contract. Milvian Bridge, 4th pier from the north bank. Low water window at dawn. The rubbing is from a piece we glimpsed, battered thin, within a limed seam under the waterline. Something thin and metal holds it in place. The rivet fell loose from nearby mortar. I found the triple grain mark inside the lime by chance. It matches a mason's secret habit my mentor once showed me in Verona. 3 small points like a sign-off. I think our object carries H. Su Signo. The rest is hidden. Someone else is already watching the site. I cannot trust my phone. Please come if you can. E.Z. I held the note to the light. The paper's thickness cast shallow shadows where the nib had pressed down. The words were steady, but I imagined the hand that wrote them glancing deep at a window now and then. I laid the vellum over a white sheet and traced the circle with my eye. The letter spacing suggested a small diameter, no bigger than the palm of my hand. The disc in the middle radiated short lines like a steady sun. The letters curved with care. This was not hurried graffiti. It was cut to last. The rivet's lime accretion told its own truth. Lime that old hardens like memory and holds what touches it. The 3 grains were not in a line, but a triangle. 2 level, the 3rd set a breath higher, just off-center. The pattern liked to hide in plain sight. A man who marks his work like that almost always repeats himself. Penelope gave a small snore, a sound like a distant kettle beginning to sing. I stroked her ear with one finger and watched her settle. The rain went on, unbothered by my choices. I looked back at the tray of coins, Sol on the left, the scratch like a chi and rho on the right. Between them, the vellum circle, a sun ringed with letters, Latin words that promised something bold if I could read the rest. My eyes moved to the window. Streetlights melted on the wet road. Beyond them, the city kept its secrets as kindly as it could. I returned to the note. Milvian Bridge. The name moved the air in my chest. Constantine rode that road from the north, via Flaminia, toward Rome's gate. Maxentius had broken his long habit of staying behind walls and had chosen to meet him there. If there was a metal tablet inscribed with, "By this, conquer," and if it sat within the bridge's fabric, then someone had made a promise to memory. Someone had locked a story into stone, and someone now wanted to lift that story out and sell it, or seal it away for good. I rolled the vellum closed and slid it back into its wrapper. The rivet I left on the desk. The 3 small grains in its line caught the lamp with the smallest points of light, like 3 stars in a pale sky. The hour was not late enough to stop me, nor early enough to rush me. It was the kind of hour when decisions turn easy and simple. I would go. Chapter 2, in which vellum whispers and Rome divides. The stairwell creaked as I opened the door again. The courier had not gone far. He hovered by the entrance, as if he had left something unsaid and waited for the courage to say it. She said not to text, he told me in a whisper, as if the walls might disapprove. If you accept, meet her at the North Bank parapet an hour before dawn. An hour before, I repeated. My voice matched his quiet. Thank you. He nodded. Outside, a black car idled at the corner. It lingered too long, then drifted away without a sound beyond the steady rain. He saw it as well. His shoulders loosened when it left. Back in my study, I placed the rubbing, the rivet, and the note in a shallow tray. I sat and drew the lamp closer. The vellum was damp, but the letters were clear. H-O-C, then a faint space, then S-I-G-J-O. I traced them with a dry brush, hovering, not touching. The circle held its line like a narrow lane cut through a field. I measured the letter spacing with a strip of paper and small pencil marks. The crush of the strokes told me the hand that made the original worked with a guide. The arc was consistent. The stop between HOC and signo made sense. In Latin, in hoc signo vinces, in this sign you will conquer, spreads that first word, hoc, like an anchor. On a small circle, the spacing must be planned. The even rhythm of the marks said it had been. The rivet told me a different part of the story. Iron fasteners lose their bite in lime after centuries. They bleed rust and then freeze. This one carried a skin of lime with its own tiny history. 3 grains sat in a small triangle, 2 at the base, 1 above. I had seen marks like that before, in stonemasons' games, in a guild's tiny pride, or in an agreement between cousins who promised to spot each other's work across years and towns. The lime had preserved it like a pressed flower. Folded within the note, I now found a photocopy on thin office paper. The ink had smudged slightly in the damp, but the words had survived. A 15th century notebook, it said in a margin, once held in a private library in Perugia, now digitized. The copied page described a jewel casket set in the old footings of the bridge of Milvius, bearing a solar seal and the very words by which he conquered. A tidy line drawing showed a square box with a small disc on the lid and letters nestled like a wreath. A jewel casket at the footings, a solar seal. The very words. The image of the vellum rubbing and the weight of the rivet began to join hands in my mind. I spoke softly for Penelope, for myself, and for you. Here is the ground, my friend. The year is 312 CE. The grand experiment of the tetrarchy rule of 4 emperors has shaken itself apart. After Diocletian left office, his careful ladder broke. Men with armies filled the gap. I settled deeper. The rain became a steady curtain. Constantine, son of Constantius, holds the northwest. Maxentius rules Rome and Italy by force and favor. Constantine crosses the Alps with speed. He wins at Turin and at Verona. The road to Rome, the Via Flaminia, lies open. Maxentius chooses to leave his walls and meet him near the Milvian Bridge. Some say he reads the Sibylline books and sees a line that an enemy of the Romans will die on his anniversary. He believes that enemy is Constantine. He marches out. I paused and lifted the vellum. The letters held their breath. 2 early Christian writers later tell us about a sign. Lactantius says that on the night before the battle, Constantine dreamed that he should mark the soldiers' shields with a heavenly sign. Chi joined to Rho, the first 2 letters of Christ's name in Greek. He tells us the sign went to war on shields. Eusebius, writing later and claiming Constantine told him himself, says that at noon in the sky, above the sun, he saw a cross of light with the words "En tuto nika" in Greek, "By this conquer." That night he dreams again. Christ explains the sign, and the next day victory. I placed the vellum next to the coin tray. What did the emperor see? Was it a dream, a sky phenomenon? A memory reshaped by faith and politics? We know this, his coins, after the battle, still show Sol Invictus for a while. The Arch of Constantine credits divine inspiration, but does not carve a cross. He was moving from one world to another, one careful step at a time. Art later paints a radiant cross in the blue, words harden into story. The rubbing sunboss and the Latin letters around it suggested a bridge of another kind. I could hear the logic click as it would in any simple lock. If a small metal tablet existed, one that could turn in the hand with two faces, it might show both stories at once. One face with a radiant sun and the Latin words in hoc signo vinces, the other with key and row and the Greek on teutonica. A quiet union hidden in the bridge, waiting for history to grow into it. The photocopy hand drew a box, a reliquary perhaps, a small casket to protect a thin sheet so it would not bend. The rivet, found loose in nearby lime, carried the 3-grain mark like a whisper from an old cousin. The vellum gave me letters in a tight circle that were meant to ring something small and round. I turned my chair toward the window. The black car was gone now. A sheen lay across the street. In the glass, I saw my reflection and Penelope asleep, ear cocked toward the world, as if the world might need her at any moment. Low water window at dawn, I said. The Tiber, like any old river, breathes in and out in quiet ways. A low stage exposes seams and corners that most eyes never see. Someone else was already watching. Dr. Zupan had kept her phone dark for a reason. A man like Sylvanus Ferry, if he exists as I suspect, uses permits and engines and polite words as easily as others use knives. He would not break a bridge with a hammer. He would sigh and sign a paper and let a diver do the delicate wrong at the exact right minute. I placed the rivet back in its wrapper and sealed the tray. We do not need to fight him, I told Penelope. We only need to arrive with time and with a light. I looked at the clock. The math was simple. If I closed my eyes now, I could walk the banks of the Tiber before it saw the sun. I could go backward in my own way. I could find the point to stand upon when dawn came. Penelope opened one eye. We understood each other. I slid a blanket over her and watched her sigh into it. I accept, I said to the room. Let's go to the river. Chapter 3. In which smoke becomes river mist. I dimmed the lamps until the room felt held by the rain and the quiet glow of embers under glass. I opened my cedar box and took out my pipe. The bowl was smooth from years of use, the stem warm where my thumb had learned to rest. I mixed my dreaming blend with care on a porcelain dish, a ribbon of tobacco, a pinch of valerian for calm, a few poppy seeds for remembrance, and the smallest breath of nightshade for the edge that lets the mind pass without fear. I do not recommend imitation. It is a key cut to one lock only. I filled the bowl and tamped it with the back of a brass spoon. The match caught on the third strike. The first curls of smoke rose like silver threads and found the corners of the room. I breathed slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth, again and again, each breath longer than the last. I placed my feet flat on the old rug and let my back rest against the chair. I set my palms on the arms, open. Thought slowed to a soft pace. The present began to loosen its grip. The smell of the blend folded around me in layers, leaf, earth, a faint sweetness together with something dry and old, like paper that has told a long story and now wants to rest. I brought my attention to a single point, the rim of the vellum circle in my mind. I pictured each letter as a bead on a thread, each bead connected to a hand, each hand connected to a man who cut the brass die, that man connected to a foreman who ordered the work, the foreman to an officer who kept a careful secret, the officer to an emperor who moved between old gods and a new sign, all connected to a river that watched it all and kept its level under moon and cloud. I moved backward along those connections, not with force, with patience. I traced one effect to its cause, and that cause to its origin. The logic felt clean, like smooth wood under the fingers. I let the smoke walk from calculations into something wider. This is when I enter the place I was taught to call my mind palace. The rooms there are not all mine. They open into something shared. The collective memory hangs like mist in those halls. It is magic. It is the present remembering itself with the help of a steady breath. The light in my study faded to the edge of a thought. The rain became the slow sigh of a different water. The floor under my feet loosened, softened, and rose again with a different grain. I felt leather under my legs. My chair had become a saddle, by degrees too small to notice until they were complete. The smell of wood smoke replaced the cedar. Wet wool, horse sweat, and iron filled the air. Hoofbeats rose and fell in a measured line. Harness bells chimed now and then. A pennant snapped somewhere at the road and then settled. The sound of my breath blended with the breath of the horse under me. I did not need to pull the reins. The animal already knew the path because the men who led it knew. I opened my eyes, and the color of the world had changed. I stood, not myself, and yet entirely myself, as a clerk within Constantine's moving train. My hands were empty. A parchment satchel tugged at my shoulder with a quiet insistence. A reed pen rode behind my ear. The cuff of my sleeve was stained with a tidy fan of ink where I had tested a nib and found it sound. Ahead, the Via Flaminia ran like a pale ribbon along the ridge toward a city that waited behind hills. To my right, the Tiber moved slow and dark, oily and patient, under a sky that had not yet chosen dawn over dusk. Campfires salted the distance with low, amber dots. The smell of evening fires slid over the camp like a blanket. A cart wheel struck a stone and corrected itself without complaint. Somewhere, a far officer's voice reminded a boy to eat. The leather creak and the steady rhythm of feet and hooves rolled on. My body felt warm and ready, as if hunger and sleep had agreed to share me and keep their quarrel for another ein. This was the northern approach to Rome. This was the line of march before the battle of the Milvian Bridge. I could not yet see the bridge, but I knew where it would be when the road bent left toward the water. I could feel the pull of it, like a compass in the ribs. The air carried the river's cool breath. I lifted my face to the sky. The last of the day brushed the clouds. The edges of them shone like dull metal, then dimmed. No bright sky sign now. No vision to stun the eye. Only the honest work of men, stacking wood and checking straps, sharpening with quiet care, say prayers in murmurs and through the mouths of old habits. I breathed, steady and slow, and let that camp fill me with its sound and weight. If fear walked here, it walked in soft shoes. The calm at the center of the storm was real. It has always been my place. I was ready to find the small thing that would ground the great one. The present had released me. The past had accepted me, for now. I stood in its edgelight and listened for the first clue to speak. Chapter 4, in which campfires, a bridge, and a reversed word appear. The dream set me down without a jolt. I stood steady on the earth of the Via Flaminia, north of Rome, under a sky the color of bruised slate. We were in the camp of Constantine, on the evening before the battle of the Milvian Bridge. Fires dotted the field like slow stars fallen to the ground. Leather creaked. Harness bells chimed. The Tiber moved beyond us, dark and patient, as if it had seen everything and would see more. I carried a clerk's satchel and the calm that tends to keep me invisible. No one challenges a figure who looks like he belongs with papers and wax tablets. Constantine's men moved with purpose, but not with panic. They sharpened blades, they checked straps, they touched small amulets at their throats. Some prayed to the unconquered sun, some to Christ. A few prayed to both, which told me more than any speech could say. South of us, the Milvian Bridge rose in silhouette. Its turrets cut the low sky like the teeth of a giant key. On the far bank, the watchers of Maxentius showed in flickers. Armor caught the last light and winked once. Then it was gone. The river swallowed sound. It held its cool breath. A frame for a victory standard stood nearby. It was tall. The crossbar waited for its emblem. A few soldiers stood around it, with the look of men guarding a thought more than an object. One or two wore sunburst falerae on their belts. Those round plates bore faint rays scratched by a skilled hand. That mark would matter. Men who wear a sun on a belt often guard a secret about light. I kept my pace slow. I let the camp's rhythm set my own. I murmured a greeting in Latin here and there. I passed the mule lines where the animals chewed and shifted. The smell of wet wool and wood smoke filled the air. Now and then a gust carried the oily scent of the river and something like crushed bay leaves. Rome uses laurel smoke like others use words. The tent of the Vexillarii stood slightly apart. These were the standard bearers. Their tent was a workshop as much as a shelter. When I ducked inside, the fire in the brazier breathed a slow heat. Tools lay in neat lines: bronze, iron, leather, beeswax. I heard the faint scrape of a graver in wood. Someone worked on a mold with care and little talk. A young man glanced up and then back down. He was not troubled by my presence. I wore a clerk's face and the smooth tone of a man who writes for others to sign. I moved to a side table. There, beneath a roll of rawhide, I found what my fingertips expected. It was a small, curved piece of bronze, not a coin die. I knew that feel. It was thicker, heavier, kinder to the touch, as if made to shape metal without striking it too hard. I turned it in my palm. The arc matched a circle's rim. On its inner face, the letters were faint and reversed by design. I breathed on it to sheathe the surface. The smoke from the brazier and my breath made the letters show clearer. I read it out, slow. Signo. The curve completed the arc I could not see. The letters cupped a small boss in the center. That boss bore radiating lines like a tight sun. This was not for coinage. The surface was too plain. There was no portrait, no wreath, no figure leading captives. It was a die to impress thin metal sheet. I could see the steel pins in my mind that would align this arc to its mates. 4 or 5 arcs would make a full circle of letters. The words would read around a radiant disk. The phrase would be known in both Latin and Greek. The promise was the same in both tongues. By this, conquer. I set the arc down and palmed a smear of beeswax from a bowl to hide the shine of my curiosity. I glanced at the nearby pallet. A craftsman had traced Greek letters faintly in wax to guide a later hand. I saw a Greek nu. I saw a kappa. The memory of Eusebius moved like a faint echo. He spoke of a cross of light at noon, and the Greek words, on tuto nika. He wrote them years later. Others wrote sooner. Lactantius spoke of a dream, and the Chi-Rho on shields. The two accounts did not cancel. They overlapped like two palm prints on one glass. As my eyes adjusted, I saw more. Leather strops, little punches for dots and stars. A strap of lead pricked with marks at equal spacing. It looked like a measure for letters around a curve. I would wait for this one. The right witness would make sense of it. A gust pressed the tent canvas. Outside, horse lines clinked and settled. I heard the chink of harness, the low talk of officers passing by, and a slow rising tension. The knot of men with sunburst plates on their belts moved in a tight group. They passed the tent flap. They spoke low. Their voices were level, but they had a duty that prickled like a burr. They protected an omen. Men will kill to guard a thought if they believe the thought makes a wall around a life. I left the tent and walked the line of the river. The Milvian Bridge stood to my left now. Its piers stood like the bones of a hand. The water whispered at their bases. Downstream, the trace of a floating pontoon bridge made a dull line on the surface. Maxentius had set it as a second way across. It would not serve him long. I rested a hand on the cool stone of a parapet. I let the stone speak. It had been set generations before, but it would swallow new secrets soon. I watched the far bank. Torches moved like fireflies. I watched the near bank. Men walked with purpose and then stopped to whisper. One of the young standard-bearers stepped near me with a water skin. He glanced at my satchel and my steady face. He tried to walk past. Then he paused and turned back. His eyes flicked to the sunburst falera on an officer and then to me again. He weighed a choice. He made it. "Dominus?" he murmured, in Latin as careful as his hands. "Do you write for the officers, or do you sometimes write what others are afraid to say?" "I write what is true," I said, as calm as the Tiber, "and I carry things that should not be lost." He nodded once. He held his voice low. "Then, after last light, meet me by the rope store behind the vexillary tent. I will bring you something, but we must leave no trail. There are eyes upon eyes." His name, I would learn, was Aurelius Marcellus. For now, I gave him a small nod. I returned to the tent, and I replaced the curved die where I had found it. I walked slow. I didn't touch anything else. I watched how the tools sat so I could read who had used them and when. A set of tiny punches had lime dust on it, which didn't belong here. Lime dust meant masonry. Someone had been in two worlds this day, metal and stone. The light fell another finger's width. Wind pressed the tents. It brought the scent of river mud and pine smoke. A trumpet sounded, a note that lingered and then died. The men around the standard frame stood closer now. From a distance, it looked like a plain wooden cross. It would not be plain for long. Behind the tent, the coils of rope waited like tame snakes. Aurelius came a shadow first. He kept his head low. He moved with the discipline of a man who has learned to keep his breath steady before all else. He lifted a fold of his cloak and slipped a small strip of lead into my palm. "Do not open your hand here," he whispered. "Walk. Count 12 paces, then look. If you are who you say you are, you will see what I fear and what I hope. If you are not, then it will mean nothing to you and will end here without harm." I walked. I counted. I opened my hand. The lead was soft and cool. Prick marks dotted it at measured intervals. Near one end, 3 tiny divots sat in a small triangle, 2 level and 1 a breath higher. The mark was not random. It was the sort of sign a mason uses to leave a private trail in a public wall. I closed my hand and turned back. Aurelius watched my face, but not my eyes. Soldiers learn to see without staring. I nodded. Once. "You are right," I said. "This is a measure for letters. And the 3-dot triangle is a signature. It points to a place someone wants to remember a long time from now." His shoulders eased by the width of 1 coin. "Then we must speak," he said. "We must speak before men with sons on their belts. Take this from my hands and turn it into something it was us meant to be." We moved into the tent's shadow. We stood between 2 coils of rope. Above us, the wind worried the canvas. Behind us, the river moved on. Ahead of us, the night came. Chapter 5, in which Aurelius speaks of 2 faces. Aurelius Marcellus kept his voice low. He spoke from the back of his throat. He chose each word with care, as if anyone might bruise an idea if it hit too hard. His hands stayed still. His eyes watched the pattern of boots passing in the lane and the gap between one step and the next. "I am standard bearer to a man who stands close to Constantine," he said. "I was chosen because I do not shake. They praise my steadiness, but it is its battle that troubles me tonight." "Speak," I said. "You are safe with me." He breathed once. "Some say the emperor saw a cross in the sky," he went on. "Some say he dreamed. Both stories ride the same horse now. The labarum is being made. That is true. There is a crossbar. There will be a Chi-Rho. Many shields will bear it by morning. That is also true." He lifted his hand a fraction. "But, Dominus, there is another work. It is a private token, not for a banner, for a place, for a stone. 2 patterns are ready, one for Christ, one for the unconquered sun. The men with sunburst plates want one face to claim the victory. The men who whisper at dawn want another face to claim it. Those who serve both hope to keep the peace between them, at least for a while." "What you showed me," I said softly, "is the measure for the words around a circle." "Yes," he said. "We have a small die for the arc. You may have seen it. There are others for the rest of the circle. The letters will read in Latin on one sheet and in Greek on the other, but each sheet bears a different face. On one, a radiant disk. On the other, the Chi-Rho. The words are the same in meaning. In Latin, in hoc signo vinces. In Greek, en tuto nika. His mouth twitched, not with a smile, but with a human wish for things to be simpler. "My cousin is a mason," he said. "He was called to test the old stones at the north end of the Milvian Bridge. He cleaned lime at the base of the 4th pier. He said the mortar there is solid, but not as hard as mountain. It can be cut and set again in 1 quiet hour if a man has a calm hand and 2 strong friends. 4th pier, I repeated, to hear how it felt in my mouth. Counting from the north bank. He nodded. From the north bank. He leaves a small mark in his work. 3 divots. 2 level, 1 slightly higher. He called them my 3 little stars. He pressed such a mark into a bit of wet lime today as a test. He showed me his lead with the prick marks. He said, "If the Emperor wins, a jewel-capped casket will be set where I can cover it. Thin metal inside, double-faced. 1 side for those who pray to the sun, 1 side for those who call on the name. The Empire can turn the casket to the face it needs. But the truth will live. The truth is that we met halfway." "You fear the lie that claims the whole," I said. "You fear 1 side will bury the other." "I fear blasphemy through pride," he said. "I was raised in a town that loved the old gods. Now I wear a small Christ on a cord. I am not sure how to carry both in 1 heart, but I know men. I know we like to win all the way. A bridge wants both banks or it falls." The wind pushed at the tent and eased. The brazier in the vexillary tent clinked faintly as coal settled. A mule snorted. Close by, the officers with sunbursts on their belts passed again. 1 laughed at something and then did not laugh. They were men who enjoyed quiet more than noise, the kind who play long games. "What happens if the Emperor loses?" I asked. "Then nothing is set," Aurelius said. "The men with the casket go home. Some go to Christ, some go to the sun. The Tiber keeps its counsel. But if the Emperor wins, there is a low water hour when the setting can be done. The sign will be sealed in lime. The 3 small stars will be pressed into the seam. A token for those who know how to read it, and for those who will come after we are dust." He swallowed. His throat clicked. "I am a soldier," he said. "I know rope and rein and how to hold a line. I do not know politics. But I felt the way the tent thief wind moved today. The deadline moved up. The officers do not want this token seen by men whose mouths make news. They want it set, and they want no songs about it. I fear that in later years a storyteller will choose 1 face. He will make the other face go dark. He will swear he was there. He will not have been." "Lactantius wrote early," I said. "Eusebius wrote later, and with flourish. You know their names yet?" "No." "I do not," he said. "I know men when they boast. I know men when they pray. I saw both today." He unwrapped the lead strip again and showed me the prick marks by the firelight from the brazier through the canvas. The dots were at regular steps. They marked the spacing of letters that would ring a circle. The 3 small divots near the end were not for letters. They were his cousin's sign. This was our second clue. It named the pier. It told us how to count. It taught us how to recognize the seam when all else looked like stone. "Will you help me?" he asked. "I will," I said. "I will keep what should be kept, and I will bring help when help is needed. For now, you must do 1 thing. You must forget you spoke to me." He held my gaze. "I can carry silence," he said. "I have carried harder things." "Good," I said. "Then 1 more question. Who commands this private work?" "A small knot of men," he said. They answer to an officer who served in the Praetorian Guard before loyalties changed. He followed the sun then. He salutes the Chiro now. He wears a gold ring with a small radiant disc. I have met his kind, I murmured. They leave 2 doors open and close one when it suits. Boots scuffed outside. The tent flap lifted. A shadow crossed the dim light from the brazier. The voice that spoke had the weight of office and the edge of suspicion. What is that dye I saw you take up earlier? Aurelius and I did not move at first. In my hand, the lead strip lay cool and ordinary as a piece of scrap. In the tent, the simple air shifted. The knot of officers had begun to inspect the tents themselves. The deadline stepped closer. "Answer me," said the man in the opening. He had the look of a Praetorian tribune moved to special duty. His belt carried a sunburst disc. His eyes did not blink fast. He did not like to repeat himself. "The piece of bronze," I said mildly. "A former for belt plates. See the plain arc. The punch marks line with strap holes." He held out his hand. I let him hold it. He weighed it without looking down. He had seen such tools before. He could not call me a liar without knowledge to back him. He glanced at Aurelius, who kept his face slack in the soldier's way. "It is dull work," Aurelius said, "but good work. We do not want our belts to crack in rain." The tribune studied first me, then the tool, then the curve of the seam in the tent floor. He had that habit, to look along lines. It was not a bad habit. Most men forget to do it. He breathed once and handed the piece back. "Keep your tools in order," he said, "and let the canvas fall." He took 2 steps. He stopped. He turned back and spoke to someone I could not see. "Search the other tents," he said, quietly. "I do not want gossip." His footsteps faded. The pressure in the tent relaxed by the width of a hand. Aurelius's mouth held a line that did not quiver, but the message was clear. The window for private work was closing. The plan would move fast now. Either the token would be placed under cover of night, or it would vanish into the hands of men who keep things for buyers, not for books. "Tell me everything," I said to Aurelius. "Tell me how they meet to set it." He nodded. In a grove of pines by the north landing there is a small pit where tools are stored. After the battle, at low water, my cousin and I will go with one officer. We will carry a small casket. Inside will lie 2 thin sheets the size of a man's palm. One face shows the sun with Latin around it. One face shows the Chiro with Greek around it. The casket has a small bronze cap and tiny hinges. It will hold the thin sheets so they do not bend. We will open a seam in the lime at the base of the 4th pier. We will set the casket so that the Latin faces inward and the Greek faces outward, or perhaps the reverse. "Which?" I asked. "That depends on who gives the nod," he said. "But either way, the casket could be turned later if men in high seats desire it. After we set it, I will press 3 nailheads into the wet lime at the seam, 2 even, 1 a little high. Then we will smooth the rest. The Tiber will lick the face. In a day it will look as if it has always been there." And then he looked to the river and back. "And then we keep quiet," he said, "until the day we are old, if we live, or until men like you come who ask the right thing in the right way." I laid a hand lightly on his arm. "You have done right to speak," I said. "Now do right again." Do not speak more. I have what I came for. I will carry it forward." He nodded. "May the right face shine," he said, with a small, tired smile that knew better than to demand more of fate than that. We stepped out from behind the ropes. The wind had thinned. The night had settled. Fires burned low. I saw the officers move tent to tent, watchful and silent. I saw the Victory standard frame waiting, crossbar bare. The Tiber kept its even sound. It did not hurry. It did not slow. I took the lead strip and memorized the spacing, the pattern of pricks, the 3-divot triangle, and the soft bend of its end. Memory is a tool as sharp as any blade. Tonight I kept it sheathed in calm. Chapter 6. In which searches tighten and a bridge within a bridge is planned. I chose a line of shadow that led from the vexillary tent to the pines. The ground was firm. Pine needles cushioned my steps. I could see the groove of a small path worn by men who carry more than they can talk about. This would be the route to the river after the battle, when they would go to set the token. A bridge within a bridge, I thought. A small truth laid into a larger one. Behind me, the knot of officers with sunburst plates began to open the tents along the inner line. They didn't bluster. They had no need. Their authority walked a step ahead of them. Men shuffled their gear. A few looked guilty, because men often look guilty when inspected, even if they have nothing to hide. That is a human trick of the blood. The heart misreads attention as accusation. I paused under the pines. The scent here was sharper, like clean resin. A shallow pit held tools wrapped in oilcloth. A small wooden coffer stood nearby. It had a new hinge. Its grain showed careful shaping. I ran a finger along its lid and felt the lightest clip of metal beneath. A place for a bronze cap to sit snug over a seam. Aurelius joined me a moment later. He kept his breath slow as before. He set the wooden coffer between us and didn't open it. He did not have to. We both knew what would one day lie inside. "Your cousin will help you carry this," I said. "Yes," he said. "He has hands like pliers and a mind like a level." He glanced back toward the camp. "The tribune who questioned us commands part of this work. He was Praetorian once. He does not like anyone else to touch the story, but he wears a sun on his belt and now a cross on his lips." "His name?" I asked. Aurelius shook his head. "I cannot speak it here," he said. "Names carry farther than steps." "That is wise," I said. "Tell me only what matters for the setting." He crouched and drew in the earth with a stick. "From the north bank," he said, "count the piers. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth has a seam low where the water leaves the lime half a hand's width dry in a low water hour. There we will open a palm-sized slot. The casket will be set and the lime pressed back. 3 nail heads make the small triangle. The angle is as you saw on the lead, 2 even, 1 a little high." He drew 3 dots. He raised the 3rd slightly. He looked up at me. "It is perfect," he said, "but it is ours." "It is perfect enough," I said. "The Tiber completes many plans with its own hand." A horn sounded in the camp. Not the battle call. An order. Men moved as one takes a breath. The knot of officers paused and then turned their attention toward the standard frame. The time for private inspection had been cut short. Their search would continue, but it would be less careful. They would choose their target tents now and sweep them. Chance had made us travelers on a narrow plank. The tribune's shadow fell across the ropes of the vexillari tent. He spoke to a craftsman. He lifted the curved die I had held. He examined it. He turned it once and set it down. I watched his hands. They were steady. He was not an ordinary brute. He was a man who takes care. The danger in such men is that their plans rarely fall apart by accident. We returned to the edge of the lane. A few soldiers eyed us. I had the look of a clerk. Aurelius had that of a standard-bearer with permission to walk where he pleased. We did not hurry. Hurrying is a confession on legs. Near the Victory Standard frame, a craftsman traced an outline on a small plate with a bone stylus. The lines formed the chi rho. The loop of the rho touched the cross of the kisht. He murmured a prayer. Another man held a bucket of red paint. Before dawn, more shields would bear the mark. Some would carry it boldly. Some would smudge it small under the boss of the shield where a man's hand might cover it in a crowd. Faith can be open. Faith can be cautious. The heart knows how far it wants to step out. Aurelius leaned close, as if smelling the paint. He spoke under his breath. "This is the part that makes me still," he said. "What if both are true? What if there was a cross of light above the sun, or a halo with a cross in it? Men can see one and call it the other. And what if the dream came too, with the quiet voice in the night? The stories might not disagree. They might be two men touching one beast in the dark, and each telling of what his hand found first. Then the double face is at a lie," I said. "It is an honest bridge. It says we didn't know everything in 1 hour, but we knew enough to cross this river and to stop killing our brothers for a time." His eyes softened. "Yes," he said. "That is what I want. That is why I risk this talk." The tribune began to move again. He chose 3 tents. He entered them with 2 men. He had a list in his head. The list might have been short. It might have had vexillari on it. I didn't like the way the line of his mouth sharpened when he glanced at our tent's tools. He recognized quality and purpose. Such men are dangerous when they think the purpose runs counter to their own. We slipped away from the main track and entered a stand of willow by the river. The ground here was damp and smelled of the Tiber's slow breath. Reeds made a faint shushing sound as wind passed through them. I crouched and let my fingers find the wet silt. I drew a line for the north bank and small squares for each pier. I marked the 4th. I pressed 3 dots near it with the tip of my nail. 2 level, 1 higher. A map small enough to fit in a hand. The mind likes small maps before it can carry big ones. Voices carried from the tents. A craftsman protested and then quieted. The brazier picked that moment to spit as resin popped. It sounded louder than it was. Every small sound does when men hold their breath for too long. Aurelius's gaze followed the line of my drawing, then lifted to the bridge, then returned to the marks in the silt. He took a steadying breath. "If we win tomorrow," he said, "we make this real. If we lose, I will bury this lead strip, and not even my cousin will know where." "If you lose, others will fight other days," I said. "This token will find its tie. But I do not think you will lose. History leans a certain way tonight." He looked at me as if I had said the fire would be hot when a hand reached into it. Some truths do not need rhetoric. They just sit there and wait. He nodded once. His jaw relaxed. We rose and walked back toward the camp edge. The moon did not show. Clouds made a lid. That suited me fine. Darkness gives privacy to plans that serve no one's greed. The officers did not see us pass. They were busy deciding which corners of the world to shine their lanterns into. Near the toolpit, Aurelius paused. He touched the wooden coffer with 2 fingers. He did not open it. He did not need to look inside to believe. He had been close to it before. He knew the weight of the thin metal and the feel of the hinge. He knew the way the small bronze cap would click when set right. He knew how the line would stick to his fingertips when he pressed the seam smooth. "Tomorrow night," he said, "if the Tiber lets us, if the officers do not change their plan, if the Emperor does not want a different story by noon, prepare for all 3, I said, because men change plans, proof, and pride with the same quickness when victory touches them." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You speak as if you have seen this before." "I have seen men," I said, "and I have seen rivers. Between the 2, rivers are kinder." We parted without gesture. He stepped back into his duty. I drifted like smoke toward the far edge of the camp. The Milvian Bridge stood quiet and blind to our plans. The Tiber kept its patient voice. The knot of officers with sons on their belts continued their inspections, but the night had thinned to a time when men tire of finding what they do not want to find. I returned to the Vexellarii tent one last time. I set the curved die back into a roll of tools so it would not seem to have shifted. I wiped my finger marks from the beeswax with the heel of my hand. I left the lead strip where it had been, in my inner pocket, against the beat of my heart. No one would search there tonight. They did not notice me. When I stepped out, the air felt cooler. Dawn was still far, but the night had turned a corner in itself. The camp fell into a rhythm of last checks. Men sat by their shields and grew quiet. 1 or 2 murmured names into the dark. Names of children, names of wives, names of fathers who had cut straps for their first harness. The kind of names that hold a man to a ground he may not see again. I listened. I learned. I kept watch. It is the primary duty of a dreaming detective. Danger does not make me hurry. It makes me exact. It makes me sure. Chapter 7. In which silt, signs, and scents align. Before dawn, I took myself to the near bank below the bridge. The river carried small bits of straw and leaf. They bumped the stone and whispered away. My boots found a low shelf of rock. The water lapped at my toes. The air smelled of iron and reeds. I knelt and pressed my hand to the lime at the base of the pier. Cold slid into my palm like a thought. In soft silt, I drew what we knew. I made a long, straight line for the north bank. I put 5 small squares for piers, with longer gaps for the arches. I marked the 4th pier with a dot. I added 3 smaller dots in a little triangle near its base. I raised the 3rd dot a hair. Clue 1. The curved bronze die in the Vexellarii tent. It fixed the tablet's size. If the arc made 1/5 of the circle, then 5 arcs made the whole ring of letters. The Roman hand in those letters had a certain width. I had measured that width with my thumb on the die's edge. Each letter would take a small space. A full ring of letters for in hoc signo vinces would need a certain circle. Note large, not tiny. About the size of a man's broad thumb spread to the first joint. That is to say, about 36 to 40 millimeters across. Call it a small palm piece. Thin metal in such a small circle bends easily. That is why you back it with something. A thin bronze cap, a wooden bed, or, as Aurelius said, a small casket. It makes sense. Men who make standards know metal. They make protection for what is delicate. Clue 2. The lead template with prick marks. It told letter spacing. It told me there were not too many letters for the small circle. It told me the mason's mark. 3 small divots set like a tiny signature. 2 level, 1 high. It told me the count of the pier from the north bank, 4th. It told me the window for setting, low water. It told me the habit of the man who would set it. He works square, he marks lightly. He likes to leave a sign not for the crowd but for another craftsman to smile at. That is important. Real secrets do not hide in shadows. They hide in plain stone, with one small detail that only a worker sees. I let each piece click into place. The mind likes order. It sleeps better when it has it. I thought of the vellum rubbing that lay in my study in the waking world. The words, "Hoc signa," ran in a circle around a blazing disc on that rubbing. The spacing there matched what I felt here in the die. The geometry was the same, a palm-sized round with letters tight and even. The rubbing had been taken from a thin sheet or a pressed cap. The iron rivet in the envelope had lime crust with 3 small grains in a triangle. Not chance, a mason's sign. If I was right, then in the waking world, at the Milvian Bridge in 2026, there was a lime seam at the base of the 4th pier from the north bank. It had 3 tiny pebbles in it in a triangle, 2 level, 1 high. Behind that thin crust, set in a hollow cavity, lay a small casket. Inside it lay a thin, double-faced sheet with 2 messages in 2 tongues and 2 faces. One face bore the radiant disc of Sol Invictus with the Latin words in hoc signo vinces. The other bore a neat cliro with the Greek words on teutonica. It had been placed after victory to carry a bridge of meaning under the feet of those who had crossed with swords. Why hide it? Because a thing that holds 2 meanings is easy to break when one side wants the whole. The men who set it had wanted to honor both narratives in one token. They set it where the river touched it and kept it safe from speech. Later, a storyteller would prefer one face. He would say he saw the exact sign in the sky. He would say his memory was sworn under oath. The oath might be honest to his heart. Memory is a clever partner. It fills holes, it polishes, it forgets the rough edge of the first hour. I closed my eyes. Camp sounds moved like a tide. The horses stamped. Men coughed. A centurion spoke steady words to his contubernium, his squad of 8 men. He told them where to stand and how to look. He told them to breathe. He said to drink now and to hold water in the mouth without swallowing so the tongue would not stick later. It was practical. It was kind in its way. I opened my eyes and looked again at the pier. I found where the mortar looked a shade lighter. In daylight, it would be clear. In shadow, only a reader of stone would note it. I ran my thumb along the seam. I didn't feel the triangle. The water was too high tonight. Low water would show it. In the waking world, Dr. Elani Zupan had timed that visit to a low water window at dawn. She knew what she had seen in the rubbing. She had found the right pier. She had found the right seam. She had felt the right clue in the rivet's line. She had written to me because someone else had seen the same window and had a different plan for it. I stepped back from the river and found a small rise. I sat. I let my legs relax. I let my hands rest. Calm is a tool sharper than a blade. Panic is a poor tool for a detective. It makes you hurry past the small stones that point the way. There was a risk tonight. The knot of officers were searching. If they found the lead template and the curved die together, and a man they did not control, they would close that man's mouth. They would do it quietly. They would say it was for order. They would be wrong, but power often prefers its own confession. I weighed the danger. I am not here to brawl. I am here to guide a line between times. The safest path was to step back from the men with swords and keep to the river and the stones. I already had what I needed. I spoke a soft mini recap aloud for those who drift with me. We are in the camp of Constantine, north of Rome, on the eve of the Milvian Bridge fight, I said, almost in a whisper. I found a curved bronze die in the standard-bearer's tent. It prints the arc of Signo around a small sun that tells me a small, thin metal token exists. Aurelius, a standard-bearer, gave me a lead template marked with letter spacing and 3 tiny divots at the end. His Mason cousin uses that triangle as a signature. He told you the casket is to be set in wet lime at the base of the 4th pier from the north bank and marked with 3 dots in a triangle. If we are right, then in the waking world, under a thin lime shell, a double-faced token waits. It ties the sun and the Chiro together. Someone in 2026 plans to take it at dawn. We will not let that happen. The river made a soft knocking against a stone. It sounded like a knuckle rapping a door. The image carried me to my study, where a bicycle courier had knocked in the rain and handed me a padded envelope. The vellum rubbing, the rivet. The note from Dr. Zupan. Low water window at dawn. Someone else is already watching. The black car that idled then slid away. The threat in the present was as calm as the one here. It smiled. It preferred low voices. It wore a signet ring with a sun. I rose and returned toward the pines. The camp had shifted into a waiting mode. The search had eased. The Tribune no longer circled tent after tent. He had posted men at intervals and taken his watch to the pine grove. He chose higher ground. He watched the bridge. He was not a fool. I kept out of his line of sight. I did not need more from him. I had what his plan had shown me already: the method, the place, the sign. I filed each detail in my mind palace, as I have done since boyhood. It is a large house. It keeps more rooms than most minds would enjoy. My rooms do not echo. They absorb. They quiet. They order. On a broad, flat stone, I set the images one by one. The curved die, the lead template, the coffer, the 4th pier, the triangle, the low water hour. Then I set beside them the present tools I would need: a strong magnet tied to silk thread, a small low-light camera, printed permits, the right name of a heritage officer who answers at ungodly hours because she loves stone more than sleep. I almost smiled. I let the muscles of my face stay loose. This was the point where most danger resolves into simple steps. Walk to river. Lower the magnet. Feel the tap on hidden metal. Name the seam. Name the law. Offer a kind, fair choice to the man who would steal. Let a quiet authority step in. Keep voices low. Keep hands steady. Those who want to fight rarely enjoy such scenes. They cannot find a place to put their fists. That is the best place to be. A breeze came down from the north. It smelled of wet leaves and iron nails and the faintest hint of wine. Somewhere, a small cup had been spilled. I had my plan. I had my proof. One more thing remained to see. It was not the fight itself. It was what followed. It would teach me the exact position of the casket. It would teach me the look of the seam half an hour after the setting. It would teach me how the nail head marks dried and how the lime blushed when pressed by a warm hand. Those details matter when you must find a thing by touch in cold river water before dawn. So I leaned against the rough bark of a pine and let my eyes close for a moment. When I opened them, the world had turned. Chapter 8, in which 3 small stars fix the plan. Morning broke like a slow, grey lid lifting. The camp did not roar, it breathed doubt. Men formed ranks, shields knocked lightly. The victory standard still waited for its full sign, but smaller shields had fresh paint. Some chiros looked bold and neat, some looked smudged. Hands had shaken in the dark. That happens. What came next? Did it need my full telling here? You know the names: Constantine, Maxentius, the Milvian Bridge, the Via Flaminia, the Tiber. When lines met, the ground thudded. The air filled with the iron stink that comes when men scrape metal over metal and then over flesh. The pontoon bridge downstream shivered under weight. As the lines broke, men tried to pass over it in panic. The river broke their path as if snapping a twig. Many fell. Maxentius himself went into the Tiber in his armor. Water does not care for rank. I stood back, as is my duty. I watched for the moment after clamor when duty changes shape. Trumpets blew. Victory tilted. The banners steadied. The talk moved from blood to tasks. A different set of men stirred. Men who did not need praise, but needed space. Aurelius was among them. At low water in the next hour, when the edge of the lime lay as bare as it would for days, Aurelius walked with his cousin and an officer toward the 4th pier. They carried the small wooden coffer. The officer with them did not speak much. He wore a gold ring. The ring showed a small, radiant sun. He kept his eyes on the ground. He did not look at the faces of men. He looked at the seams of things. I moved with them in the quiet way my dream walking gives me. Some nights I am a voice. Some nights a breath of wind at a man's cheek. Tonight I was a silence that keeps time. At the base of the 4th pier, the mason knelt. He set a chisel. He tapped, not to break, but to read. He found the seam he had tested. He widened it by the width of a thumb. He scooped out wet lime with a small spoon of his own making. He wiped the spoon on his sleeve each pass. He worked with a reverence that was not piety but craft. The officer opened the coffer. Inside lay 2 very thin sheets, pressed so clean that the ridges of the letters caught the light even in the low dawn. One sheet bore a radiant disk with tight rays. Around it ran neat Latin, in hoc signo vinces. The other bore the Chi-Rho, centered and clear. Around it ran the Greek,
en tutonica.
The officer looked up. He weighed a choice as men weigh a coin. He turned the little casket in his hands. He made a small adjustment I could not hear. He might have said which face would face outward first. He did not ask the gods. He did not ask Christ. He asked the current of politics and the mood of the emperor he served. He chose. He placed the sheets in the casket, face to face. He set the bronze cap. It clicked with a soft, certain sound. Aurelius held the coffer while the mason eased the lime back with fingers and thumbs. They slid the casket into the cavity until its face sat flush with the world. The mason pressed lime around the edges. He smoothed it with his thumb. Lime hummed under his touch like clay under a potter's hand. He reached into his pouch and took 3 small iron nail heads. He pressed them in a triangle near the seam. 2 level, 1 slightly high. He looked at Aurelius. Aurelius breathed out as if setting down a weight he had carried too long. Still, the officer watched without speech. He was a man who prefers to exert control by seeing and not speaking. It is a common style. It is also dangerous, because silence can mean consent and can also mean nothing at all. They stood back. The river lapped. The lime looked pale at the touch points and darker in the troughs. I took a mental impression. The right edge of the triangle sat closer to the stone than the left. The high dot was a finger's width above the line. The seam ran like a slightly wavering thread. It was not perfectly straight. Good. Perfect lines often belong to lies. The officer nodded once. He turned away. He left no prayer. He did not bless it nor curse it. He had done a job. He would tell men that the emperor had been favored by a sign. He would not tell them that 2 signs had lived together under their feet. He would let him do that work, or not. Aurelius touched the stone. His hand was steady. He whispered something I could not quite catch. It might have been a thanks. It might have been a promise. He rose. He and his cousin gathered their tools. They wiped the spoon. They tucked it in the coffer's now empty bed. They carried the coffer away. They would use it to store nails later, and no one would wonder why it had a bronze cap so neat it clicked. Men came down to wash their faces at the river. They did not see the new sea. The Tiber did its slow work. The dots dulled. The lime took on the river's stain and forgot it had ever been bright. That is how you keep a thing safe. You let the world adopt it. You do not dress it as important. I traced the triangle once more in my mind. 2 level, 1 slightly high. The right dot sat closer to the stone lip than the left. One day, my fingers in the dark water would feel that. I would not need to see. I would lower a magnet on a silk thread, and it would find the bronze cap through the lime skin. It would tap once, a small kiss of metal to metal. I would know we had found the casket. We would not rush. We would not break anything we did not have to. We would call the right person at the right moment. We would open the seam with love for the stone and for the story it guarded. I let the battle dust settle farther from me. Crowds chanted Constantine's name above. Men began to bring bodies from the shallows. The usual thunder of victory swelled and drifted. I stood a long minute and listened for the quiet underneath it all. It was still there. It always is. Then I looked ahead. Waking would come soon. In the waking world, I would meet Dr. Elani Zupan at the north bank of this same bridge. It would be dawn. A low water window would open again. A maintenance barge would draw near and bump the stones. A man in a hard hat with a neat beard shadow and a small sun on a gold signet ring would tell us it was a routine inspection. His name would be Silvanus Ferry. He would be courteous and wrong. He would not know yet that we would not leave him room to slip the token from the stone. I listed what I needed, slow and sure. 1. A strong magnet tied to a silk thread. Silk transmits small movements well. A cord or rope deadens the feel. A little weight on the line will help it hang straight, but not so much weight that it pulls the magnet free when it touches the bronze cap. 2. A small, low-light camera to record the seam and the 3 dots. We will not invade the stone without making a record everyone can see. Transparency is a disinfectant. It wipes away doubt. 3. A printed copy of the permit that governs maintenance at the bridge. I know the clause, Clause 7. It forbids disturbance prior to the arrival of an archaeologist. It demands oversight. I will hold it as a thing of calm power. Paper can stop a chisel if the right eyes are watching. 4. A quiet call to a heritage officer who answers at dawn. She knows Dr. Zupan. She respects her. She will be glad to have an early walk by the river if it means saving a piece of the past. 5. Patience. We will not provoke. We will not accuse. We will simply let the facts sit in the open air, where even stubborn men can smell them. I memorized the face of the seam again. I saw the way the waterline kissed it. I saw the way the dots made their small triangle. I saw the slight warp in the lime where a thumb had pressed too hard and then been smoothed with care. I saw the shape of the stone around it. My hands remembered what my eyes saw. That is the trick to finding things in the dark. I stepped back from the pier's base in the dream and lifted my head. The sky above Rome had cleared to a pale blue. The city waited. It did not yet know that in a few days an arch would be planned to honor this victory, the Arch of Constantine. It would speak of divine inspiration without a single Christian mark. That ambiguity would be a clue of its own. It would say, "We are crossing a bridge. We have not yet chosen forever." Men cheered again at the bank. I stayed calm. I always do. Victory in my work is the shout. It is the quiet slide of a plan fitting into its place. It is a seam pressed smooth. It is a triangle of dots no one notices but everyone benefits from. I looked once more at Aurelius. He was walking back to his unit now, his duty done. He would carry this secret like a smooth stone in his pocket through years I would never see. He would think of this morning when he looked at the river. He would feel both faces under his fingers when he prayed, whether he knew it or not. He caught my eye for a fraction and then looked away, letting the moment be just one more step in his soldier's day. Good. Secrets live longer when they are coddled. The wind from the north lifted the hairs at the back of my neck. It was not a warning. It was a nudge. Time to return. The investigation was complete. The plan was ready. The final move would come not here, but when I opened my eyes to rain glass on a modern balustrade. Before that moment, I let one last detail sink in. The triangle of dots. 2 level, 1, a whisper high. The right dot sat nearer the stone lip than the left. The seam's edge bore a tiny nick, shaped like a crescent from the mason's spoon. That nick would catch the silk thread for a breath when I lowered the magnet in the waking world. I would feel it. I would pause. I would smile inwardly, and then I would go on. I took a breath in the pine shade. I let it out. The camp noise dimmed. The river's voice grew. The dream thinned to a soft veil. I didn't rush to leave. I never rush to leave. I walk from the past with the same care I used to enter it. I carry what matters. I lay down what does not. The seam, the triangle, the die, the lead, the casket, the plan, all in their places. The final act waited at dawn. Chapter 9. The signature in the stone. River mist gathered like soft breath along the Tiber. Lamps on the parapet drew small halos in the damp. A gull's cry unstitched the quiet, then stitched it back again. I stood at the north bank wall with my hands easy in my coat pockets. The city still slept, but the bridge did not. Old stone has a way of staying awake for us. Dr. Ilani Zupan waited already, as promised. Her green scarf was dark with dew. She kept one palm around a thermos and the other on the strap of her bag. When she saw me, she managed a brief, relieved smile that faded to focus. "You came," she whispered. "I came," I said, "and I brought patience." I lifted the slender, silk-wound spool I had tucked under my coat. The silk was soft and ready. The small magnet at its end was no larger than a walnut, dark and unassuming. We only nudge the truth. We do not tear it out. The river lapped the pilings. A low-maintenance barge shouldered the current and bumped gently against old stone. Its deck lights were shaded, a dim glow put on for rules, and useful as cover for other aims. A man in a hard hat stepped from the gloom at the bow ramp with a cat's quiet grace. His navy work coat hung open over clothes that were not work at all. On his right hand, a gold signet ring with a tiny radiant disc winked once and then went still. "Dr. Zupan," he purred, his voice polite as polished metal. "Signor Holmes, so early, Rome should send you medals for loving her bridges at this tender hour." His eyes slid to the silk in my hand, then to my face. He smiled with only half his mouth. "Sylvanus Ferry, we spoke by paperwork." "We did," Ilani said. She stood a little nearer the parapet's lip. "And the paperwork reads what it reads." Sylvanus Ferry lifted both hands in a pleasant shrug. "Routine inspection. Safety. The river teaches us patience, yes, but it also rewards those who move when the water is low. I dislike tragedy. I prevent it where I can." "I share your dislike of tragedy," I answered, "especially the slow kind that begins with a pry bar and ends with nothing left to study." I gave him my small, cordial smile. It is the one that says we will all be adults here. He spread his fingers. "Then by all means look. Let us all look." He gestured to his diver, a compact man with a coiled tether and a visor. The diver didn't meet my eyes. His jaw worked once, then stilled. There. I stepped onto the barge with Ilani at my shoulder. The planks creaked. The Tiber shifted below us with that patient, oily slide I had smelled in my dream. I knelt at the base of the fourth pier from the north bank, exactly where a century of hands had told me to look. The lime skin lay smooth, then ragged, then smooth again where repairs had been patched in. I pressed my fingertips to a mortar seam. 3 tiny pebbles the size of seeds formed a triangle. 2 were level. 1 rode a whisper high, the old mason's quiet boast. I let my breath out. "May I?" I asked the water and the stone. The water said nothing. Stone never does. But the answer felt like permission. I lowered the silk. The magnet touched the surface. I let it drift and find its own small compromises. The silk thread is better than wire. Silk listens. Wire insists. I prefer listeners. At first, there was only the thrum of the river against the hull. Then the magnet ticked once against something under the line. Not a nail, not a thick spike, something thin and ferrous, pressed like a wafer beneath a crust. The silk went taut and held with a whisper of weight that tugged lightly at my fingers. "Elani," I said, quiet as rain, "here." She leaned close and followed the angle of the thread with her eyes. Her breath fogged, then cleared. "You have it," she said. The slightest tremor rode through her voice and steadied, right where the grains marked it. Silvanus Ferry's half-smile did not change, but the muscles at his temples did. "Very neat," he murmured. He nodded to his man with the visor. The diver crouched. His hand slid toward a short pry bar stowed beside a lamp. "Before that," I said, as if continuing an earlier sentence that had never been in doubt, "a small reminder. Clause 7 of the current permit. No disturbance prior to archaeological presence. You were copied on the letter. It sits in my bag in case the morning needs a memory." I glanced past his shoulder. "Good morning, officer." From the girder's shadow, a plainclothes heritage officer stepped into the light and took off her soft cap. Her face was open and calm. "Good morning," she said. "I am here. Kindly proceed within the terms. No one is in trouble if we all move with care." Silvanus Ferry's gaze slid to the river and back. He rolled his ring once around his finger. "Of course," he said. The smile returned like a trained bird. "No need for unseemly haste. Proceed, Dotteressa. We will all witness whatever the river has loaned you." He made a graceful gesture at the seam. Elani set her bag at her knees. She opened it with hands that were steady now that the rule of the morning had been named. Cotton swabs, a small vial, a soft brush, a small chisel with a rounded nose, a glassine envelope for any dust. Gentleness has weight when you use it correctly. "May I borrow your light?" I asked the diver. He looked at Ferry. Ferry held his smile steady and nodded once. The lamp was small and warm. I set it on the plank so its glow slid across the lime at a low angle. The tiny ridge at the seam threw a shadow as fine as an eyelash. Elani cleaned a line no wider than a fingernail with the swab and the brush. The chalky wash softened. She waited. Patience. Then she placed the rounded chisel at the edge and tapped once with the heel of her hand. The lime lifted, not as a break, but as a peel. A thin biscuit came free, smooth on its buried face. She cradled it in linen and handed it to the officer, who labeled the linen with date, hour, bridge, pier, seam, and witness names. No rush, no triumph, just the right thing done the right way. Below the biscuit's absence, bronze glowed darkly with age. A small casket, the size of a snuff box, sat cupped by the stone. A cap of hammered bronze sealed a wooden core, now black and hardened by sigh. The edges were lined with a finer metal that once might have been silver and now was only silver's memory. Elani did not reach for it at once. She looked at me. I nodded. "Let the moment arrive," I said, "then let it pass." She She slid a thin spatula beneath the casket and lifted with the river's rhythm, not against it. The little box sighed once, a sound like a sleeper turning on a soft bed, and came free. The officer wrote, noted, and witnessed. Ferry watched with a scholar's interest he had very nearly earned, if only he had chosen the slower road. The cap bore 3 dim studs along one edge. Decorative, you might think, unless you knew a mason who liked to sign in 3s. Under the lamplight, we saw a tiny scratch along the seam. Not a cut, not damage, a guideline scratched by a careful hand before soldering to align a lid to a base. Elani touched the line with the pad of her thumb. She did not open it yet. She looked at Ferry and the officer. Together, she said. Both nodded. We gathered closer as if around a sleeping child. With a small pick and a soft brush, Elani lifted the first of 2 fine pins that had kept the seal honest. They came free without protest. She eased the lid. Air moved between metal and wood for the first time in so many lifetimes that the river had changed its banks more than once since it last happened. The little box gave a breath. So did we. Inside rested a palm-sized circle of metal, no thicker than a coin, but larger in diameter. It lay on thin linen that had stiffened to a delicate shell. The top face showed a radiant disc with straight rays and flame tips, worked by a simple, steady hand. Around the disc, in Latin, ran the words, "In hoc signo vinces," in this sign you will conquer. The letters were neat, evenly spaced, not the work of an apprentice. The lettering had been pressed, not engraved, a detail my fingers had felt hours and centuries before when I lifted an unused die by lamplight in a different Rome. Elani turned the disc over in the linen cradle. The reverse held the chai and the rho, crossed at the hinge with great care. Around them ran the Greek words en tuto nika. By this, conquer. Not a copy of a copy. The real pair minted as a single, double-faced thought. Soul's radiance on one side, Christ's monogram on the other. The bridge itself made into a text, hiding a sentence for those who knew where to read. Elani's shoulders lowered as if someone had taken a weight from a high shelf and set it on a lower one. She did not smile widely. She let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob, and fully relief. "It is us a myth," she whispered. "Not only a myth." Sylvanus Ferry's face did not crack. He kept his half smile, but now it was gentler and more human. "Beautiful," he said. "You must admit, it would have been safer with me than with the river's line." He looked at the officer as if asking for a truce he did not deserve. "Are you not like to lose sleep?" "You will still sleep," I said. "Perhaps even better. This way, when you tell the story at dinner, you can say you watched history come into the air without stealing its breath." I looked down at his ring. The tiny sun disk on it winked again. "And your little sun will not be lonely. It has met its twin and found it well." He gave a low, theatrical shrug that admitted defeat without groaning under it. "Very well," he said. "Catalogue it. Guard it. Write footnotes in careful hands. Rome will be safer, and I will choose a different river for my mourning." He stepped back. He was not handcuffed. He was not dragged. Sometimes the right witness changes a choice without anyone bleeding at all. The officer sealed the casket and the disc, each in their labeled homes. She placed them in a foam-lined case. The diver exhaled. He had not moved the pry bar again. He rubbed his hands together once, the way a man does when he has chosen to remain on the right side of the day. The barge's deck seemed to rise as the tension left it. I have seen that happen in drawing rooms and alleyways. Relief has weight too, and when it goes, wood floats better. Elani locked the foam case's latches. She looked up at the river light, then at me. "Thank you," she said. "You found what I only guessed. You made it gentle." "I listened to what history had been trying to tell you," I said. "You heard it first." I only carried the note to the table. I touched the parapet's wet stone and felt the cool wake of a battle, and of a quiet pledge lowered by lamplight and set into wet lime by hands that now were dust. "We will let the morning take it from here." We signed what needed signing. The officer took photographs with a low-light rig. The diver coiled his tether with care. Sylvanus Ferry lifted his hands to his coat collar, turned it up against the mist, and left with a nod that carried the poise of a man who would be back in some other story, in some other city, having learned something he would never admit in words. Behind us, the river kept doing what rivers do. The Tiber took the history we had taken from it and didn't complain. It only ran on, smoothed by light. Chapter 10. Dawn's Gentler Verdict. The first birds tested the sky with soft chirps from the plane trees. The lamps went from gold to pale as dawn pushed them aside. A milk truck on the far bank gave a bored cough. The city stretched. Rome has a tired grace at daybreak that never grows old. We walked the case to a waiting van that bore the seal of the Cultural Heritage Office. Elani handled it the way one carries a sleeping child. She set it on the padded shelf as if a bump might wake a giant. The officer logged the chain of custody with calm, practiced motions. People who do their jobs well move at the same speed as trust. In that cool, pale light, the small, double-faced disc looked less like a prize and more like a sentence in a long, slow conversation between ideas. On one side, the unconquered sun that had marked coins and standards and bathhouse mosaics. On the other, a sign made from 2 Greek letters that would climb from catacomb walls to basilica vaults until its meaning was woven into laws and calendars and the arguments of bishops. This little circle didn't choose a winner. It held both in tension, at least for a while. A bridge under a bridge. "Do you think Constantine saw a cross at noon?" Elani asked softly, "or only a ring of light around the sun, and then later memory did the rest?" "The sky often gives us shapes we can use," I said. "Halos, cross beams through thin cloud, or a dream that speaks the language we are ready to learn." I think he saw enough to feel chosen. Then he chose which story to tell. It is not simple. It is not dishonest. It is human. I looked at the case, and someone here decided to set a quiet anchor where memory and policy could meet. Your disc says as much, in Latin for the old habit, in Greek for the new courage. She nodded. "A bridge then, not a mask." "A bridge," I agreed. One they knew the next age might want to cross in a single direction. So they hid the plank beneath the waterline for anyone patient enough to find it again. The officer closed her ledger. "We will take it to the lab," she said. "We will bring in a metallurgist. We will test and scan and publish. We will invite argument and welcome it. And we will not hurry the report. A patient artifact deserves patient words." She shook our hands firmly and climbed into the van. Silvanus Ferry stood by his own car a short way off, arms folded, examining a patch of cobbles with careful interest, as if they were a painting hung too low on a wall. He looked up when I approached. "You are not the villain they told stories about," I said quietly. He looked amused and not offended. "And you are not the saint the papers say you are. We are both men who enjoy the small click a lock makes when you open it with the right key." He turned the little sun on his ring with his thumb. "I have no desire to smash. I like mechanisms intact. I confess, I didn't plan to file a report if I had lifted it, but I would have kept it safe, and I would have sold its shadow and not its body." He gave a faint smile that reached his eyes this time. "There are many kinds of commerce." "I know," I said. "There are also many kinds of rest. Try the legal kind for a spell." He made a little bow, half mocking and half sincere. "Sleep well, Signor Holmes. Dream accurately." He drove off with a smooth hum. The diver walked after the van and didn't look back. Elani and I stood by the parapet and did the one thing left to do. We watched the river. Dawn turned the water from pewter to old gold. I laid my hands on the stone warmed by a sun that had climbed slowly and would climb more. The bridge had watched emperors come and go. It had learned how to wait. "I will write the first memo today," Elani said. "It will be careful. It will say what we know and what we do not. It will say that the tablet isn't proof of one vision or the other, but proof that someone held two signs together long enough to pass them on." "It will help," I said, "and when the piece reaches a classroom in a month or a year, someone will read it after lunch and feel their mind open a little. That is victory enough for any morning." A breeze crossed the river and ruffled the fringe of her scarf. "Will you sleep now?" she asked with a small grin, knowing my habits, uncertain which world I had just risen from. "I will," I said. "My chair is very forgiving." I shook her hand. Penelope would be awake soon and would want her simple breakfast and a slow amble. I walked back through streets that would make themselves fresh for another day. A baker slid trays to a counter. A bus hissed and groaned. A shopkeeper unlocked a grate with the soft clatter of old iron that has told the same joke for years. By the time I reached my door, the morning had moved on. I hung my coat, set my hat, and let myself return to the only ritual I keep with more devotion than any other. I sat in my armchair. The room received me with the gentle authority of a very old friend. I could still smell river mist in my hair. The pipe on the side table still held the faint, sweet echo of valerian and poppy. I did not need it now. The dream had been done. The mystery had gone soft in the middle, like bread that has cooled enough to slice. I let my eyes close. When they opened, everything precise in the room seemed to glow a little. Penelope lifted her head from the small braided rug beside the hearth and gave a quiet, chuffing greeting that might have been a question or a welcome or both. I reached down and rubbed the soft fur behind her ear in small circles. She leaned her head into my palm. On my desk lay the small, corroded iron rivet from the envelope that had started the night. It had looked like nothing at first glance. Now, in the slanted morning light, I could see inside the lime that clung to it 3 tiny grains aligned in a triangle. 2 level, 1 a whisper high. The same craftsman's mark I had felt in my fingers in the dark. A cousin's quiet echo in my present. A hello from a mason who had signed his work with patience and dotted it with 3 soft stars. I smiled. Little signatures travel better than we think. I set the rivet back down in its cotton bed. The room was silent in the way a cathedral's are when no one is there, full of small sounds that do not ask for answers. I stood, stretched, the way one does when one has earned permission to be simple, and let the last threads of the night fall away. Out of the line of the stage up as fast as the first stop is stop, and leap Christ with the possibility of a palm because of damage and more. Not well, yeah. It's a pair of the Now the case had closed without a slam. The day could make of it what it liked. You, dear listener, have done your part by simply staying. The world will go on arguing its edges. Here, you can set those edges down. Listen to the quiet at the window. A line of rain, thin, light, almost a veil, taps once, then again, on the glass. Each drop arrives, lands, and forgets its hurry. Each bead joins another until the pane holds one soft sheet of silver. A far street hum blends into a single note that becomes the room's own breath. Feel the chair under you. The cushion remembers you now. Your weight settles into it the way a boat settles into a good mooring. A small give, a small embrace, nothing sharp. The fibers under the cloth were woven for this slow purpose. They have been waiting all day to hold you with a kindness that asks for nothing in return. The river outside your imagination moves at its old pace. Centuries run along its back and do not disturb its ease. A reed dips and rises. A gull lifts and turns and is gone. Stone piers stand where hands placed them, and each stone warms a little under daylight and cools a little under night, and both those movements are small and right. You can let your own breath borrow that rhythm, in and out, as if you had all the time in Rome. Somewhere a brazier ticks as it settles. A coal shifts and offers at a tiny sound, like a pebble kissing another pebble under water. The air holds a faint trace of smoke and old paper and the sweet ghost of valerian. None of it asks to be named. All of it agrees with rest. A page turns, then another. Each turn is slow and smooth. The words on those pages do not need you tonight. They will be there in the morning. The lamp's shade cuts the light into a gentle circle. Inside that circle is only what you need. A cup, cooling on a saucer, the tiny ring a spoon left against porcelain, the soft breathing of a dog who has counted your steps and decided all is well. Shh. There is no hurry left in this room. Your shoulders can notice that. Let them soften. Let your jaw unhook a little. Your brow can smooth without direction, the way snow smooths a path without asking anyone to watch. You can release the list that wanted your attention. It can fold itself and tuck into a drawer that closes on a clean click. There is nothing outside that will be made better by your worry in this minute. The bridge will stand. The disc will be studied. The story will find its way without you steering it any further tonight. If a thought tries to startle you up, you can nod to it and let it walk past. If a picture from our journey steps forward, triangle of pebbles, the gleam of bronze, a sun disk napping beside a monogram, let it stand there a moment glow softly and then dim. Thoughts can become lamps that someone else has turned off with care. Each click you hear in your mind is another small piece of wakefulness stepping away politely. Listen again to the little sounds that belong to rest. The smallest tick of a clock that knows you do not need it yet. The brush of fabric when you shift into the posture your body wanted all along. The warm sigh when you let that posture have you. The even draw and release of your breath, steady as a sentry on a night where nothing threatens. And if sleep comes now like a barge gliding along a smooth current, you can let it nudge against you, soft, inevitable, and free of edges. It will hold you the way the river holds a light. It will carry you without asking for anything clever. You do not need to steer. You have done enough. You have chosen kindness for an old bridge and for yourself. That is a good day's work disguised as a story. I will stay a while longer and watch the window with you. The rain has settled to a hush that is almost not there. The world outside is softer than it was. The world inside is quieter than you expected. When you are ready to let go, you can. When you sleep, I will keep the watch. And when you wake, the chair will still remember you, and the river will still move at its own patient pace. Good night, my friend. Breathe and drift and rest.